And to talk about all this, to get a reality check on the border wall and tax reform and 100 days, let's bring in Ed O'Keefe and Kevin Cirilli. Ed is a CBS News political contributor and congressional reporter for The Washington Post, and Kevin is chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg TV. Welcome to you both.
Good to see you, Nancy.
So we do have a bit of breaking news when it comes to border wall negotiations, and it sounds like the negotiator par excellence, Donald Trump himself, might be backing down.
He told a gathering of conservative columnists, radio and TV hosts this afternoon, look, it's important. Border security is a big deal for me, but if we don't get the wall money, we can push that off essentially to the next round. That, in the words of one Democratic aide I talked to tonight, said, well, that's a game changer. That's a big relief, and that may mean that we avoid a big showdown later this week. I would caution, though, it's only Monday, and we have
the president has been known to change his mind,
and we have until Friday, so you never know.
And just to get people caught up, what happened here is that negotiators in the House and Senate, Democrats, Republicans, were sort of happily going along negotiating this funding bill, and suddenly about a week ago, the White House really started tightening the screws and saying, actually, we want some border wall money in there. Partly because they wanted to be able to check that box and say we went and got some funding, a down payment on this border wall, so that they could show that they had actually accomplished something that the president had promised. But that really put Republicans in a tough spot. First of all, Democrats were saying, no way. Right. Which then creates the possibility of a government shutdown. And there are even a lot of Republicans, Kevin, who aren't that fond of the idea of a $20 billion border wall.
Exactly. They were essentially saying, seriously, this is what is going to shut down the government. I mean, when you look at it in terms of how Republicans campaigned back during, not just for the presidential election, but also, of course, to win Congress, they said that they were going to make government more efficient. Shutting down the government while they have control of the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate does not send that signal, especially when it comes just one day before, of course, the all-important, or maybe not that important, first 100 days in office.
And if you're going to go to the brink, Ed, you need your entire team behind you, right? And it was clear, that basically every Republican from a border state has concerns about this idea that a border wall that's hundreds of miles long is really going to be the solution.
The most vivid example of that I've gotten was a conversation a few weeks ago with Jeff Flake, the senator from Arizona, Republican, who not only is a fiscal conservative and has issues with the price, but has said, look, you go down and you go to the border and you talk to people who live there, and they remind you, you'd have to reroute rivers. You would potentially lose water rights to the Rio Grande and cede the entire river to Mexico. There are other environmental concerns. There's economic concerns because of how these communities sort of buttress each other, and a wall right through them would be a real problem. It is a big deal. That said, the idea of getting more money for border security should be very easy. You remember in 2013 when they had the big fight over immigration, the 11th hour agreement included border wall funding plus drones, aerial vehicles, a little more personnel, and a lot more technology. This is a plan that's basically been written and approved by Democrats in the past. They have no reason to stand against it.
And so that's basically the face-saving plan.
Right.
And that's something that Democrats would be comfortable with, is you throw in a little bit of extra money for border security, border surveillance, maybe defense, and you allow the White House to claim a win?
Yes, but the one thing they will stand against is any more money for new personnel at Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Anything that appears to be funding a deportation force, which this may or may not be, but they have said, point blank, no new personnel at ICE that would be used in any way to enforce the deportation of immigrants, dreamers, or anyone else.
It's also where President Trump has outbranded himself, so to speak, because any type of, I find in this political climate, I'm not sure any Democrats would be able to go across the aisle and support this, especially if he's tweeting out, such as he has been doing today, that this is essentially for, quote unquote, the wall. That's a risk for them.
Well, and this is a tricky issue also because wasn't the wall supposed to be free?
Yes.
And Mexico was supposed to pay for it.
Right. And that is why there's another reason why there's no appetite for it, because there isn't $54 billion or however much it is to spend on this when you've got so many other things to spend money on.
But won't we just be back in this spot again 5 months from now? I mean, this issue is not going to go away.
Right. And you saw the speaker say, in that interview with Nora last month that, that they feel this is something that should be held off till later this year as part of next year's negotiations. The problem is, as I recall, next year is an election year, right? In a lot of states along the border, there will be elections. One wonders whether or not they'll be able to get this done.
Let's talk a little bit about health care, because members of the House and Senate have now been gone for 2 weeks. They've been getting an earful from their constituents, but also there have been these quiet negotiations going on, trying to sort of thread the needle, bring some Freedom Caucus members on board with the Obamacare replacement plan without losing any moderates. Where do we stand on that?
So tomorrow night, the chairs and the board, so to speak, of the House Freedom Caucus, the top leaders of this this ultra-conservative wing of the House of Representatives, they're going to be meeting tomorrow night in private. Now, the next night, all of the House Freedom Caucus is going to come together. They're going to be talking about a host of things, including the budget, including taxes, but also, of course, healthcare policy. The administration was somewhat bullish that they would be able to get something done, but House Speaker Paul Ryan has since essentially said, hey, wait a minute, we are not going to bring anything to the floor unless we feel we have the votes. But this, again, just beyond immigration, you've got the contract that then candidate Trump touted back on the campaign trail. Republicans have run on repealing and replacing parts of the Affordable Care Act. It almost has become conservative orthodoxy at this point. If they are unable to do it heading into a midterm election cycle, this would be devastating for them and only exacerbate the divisions within the party between the Tea Party as well as the more moderates in the House.
Are we any closer, Ed, to a solution than we were 2 weeks ago?
It doesn't sound like it. I mean, these meetings, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, will be critical in getting a sense of the potential support, not only of the Freedom Caucus, but you have this so-called Tuesday group, which is essentially all the Main Street, more mainstream Republicans who frankly come from the more vulnerable districts, the ones that are likely to face real contests next year. They have concerns, and when it comes down to a debate over do we continue to cover people with pre-existing conditions, or do we allow states to make some big changes to the bedrock pieces of this law, that's what makes them nervous and once again sends GOP leaders in the White House scrambling for some kind of a solution. There's no reason to believe that something has happened in the last 2 weeks to make this any easier.
And I think to Ed's point, which is a great one about the different factions in the House, this is where these palace intrigue stories really matter, because it's who's negotiating with who in Congress. Is Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, who of course is former chairman of the Republican National Committee, is he really the right person to be negotiating with the House Freedom Caucus, or is it Vice President Mike Pence? I mean, so this is where the personality behind the policy really comes to matter, because if they're not able to get something done and who has control or who has the president's ear, that's why those stories matter.
And it's telling that the vice president's curtailing his trip to Asia and to Australia, where he was kissing kangaroos, to come back and essentially be here.
Hoosiers on the plane, right?
That's right, of course, to be part of this, because they realize he's one of the few guys who has currency on the Hill and can maybe get these guys together.
On Capitol Hill. Kevin, I want to ask you about this supposed plan that the president is going to announce later this week, cutting the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%. How realistic is that, and what are the repercussions?
Well, Republicans would love it if they can pay for it, but you know, how they pay for it remains to be seen. But this is pretty interesting, because I was in a briefing at the White House on Friday with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. They were unveiling these executive orders to roll back Wall Street regulations known as the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act. So then President Trump walks across the street from the White House to the Treasury building, which is right next door to each other on Pennsylvania Avenue, to go sign these executive orders. He's walking back, and a reporter shouts a question about tax reform, and he goes, "We're going to get it done on Wednesday." And staffers at the White House were thinking, hey, wait a minute.
There goes our weekend.
There goes our weekend. And my sources on Capitol Hill at the House Financial Services and the tax rating committees are like, wait a minute, this is coming?
Right.
And so this is a situation where a lot of folks were caught off guard by this. So I think what you're going to see on Wednesday is a bare bones skeleton version of tax priorities. And in fact, that's what Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said publicly today. In terms of the corporate tax rate, I think what's interesting here is whether or not they're going to divide them in terms of having a business tax plan as well as the tax plan that would include all Americans. I think they're going to couple them, have a comprehensive plan.
And it's all designed to demonstrate forward momentum.
Yes.
There will not be a tax plan approved this week, but
None.
at least he's talking about it. And if there's people out there who are concerned, where is that tax plan? At least he can sort of say to them by Saturday night, well, we've put something out there. We're going to work with Congress on it. Talk to us again in 100 days and see how far we got.
Another thing going on at the White House this week is a briefing for senators that you've been reporting about, Ed, on North Korea. Why is it taking place at the White House? Who's briefing them? What's going on?
Well, we still don't know exactly why it's happening at the White House, but the Secretary of State, the Defense Secretary, a few other top national security officials had been scheduled at the request of Mitch McConnell and Senate leadership to talk to senators about the situation in North Korea. This happens all the time. They come up to the Hill, they give closed-door briefings.
We hang out in the basement, we watch them go in, we watch them come out.
And that's the key word. We watch them go to the basement. The basement has these rooms that are basically hermetically sealed to avoid any detection or eavesdropping by foreign agents or by us, frankly. There's no such facility at the White House or on White House grounds that could hold 100 senators, plus, a few dozen probably other officials who would show up for this briefing. So this caused a lot of Senate staffers to kind of scratch their heads and go, why would we do this at the White House if you're going to share classified information with us in an unsecure spot? Or are you merely having us over for window dressing's sake and not telling us anything we don't already know? The White House says they're going to convert an auditorium in the Executive Office building, which is the building to the other side of the White House from the Treasury Department, and turn it into a temporary SCIF, or what they, secret room that they can adapt for these purposes, and have it there. But Senate aides in both parties point out, well, gee, given the proximity of the Oval Office, and given that we're about to hit the 100-day mark, what do you think is going to happen? President's going to show up. Tout to them that he has this plan to take on North Korea and turn it into part of his, appeal
so is
that went
anyone
over.
balking at that?
So far, no, and that's critical because 98.9% of the country doesn't care where it's held. They want to know that lawmakers are up to speed on North Korea. They know that. They'll show up.
The last time somebody went over to the White House to look at classified material, it didn't go so well.
No,
but it was one guy.
It was a very different
giant
situation.
traffic jam in Washington. How are they all? I want to know how they're all going to get there.
They get these buses for them. They've done this before.
A motor coach.
They're all going.
They get like 2 buses, 50 seats each, and they go over.
Oh,
do the Republicans stay in one bus and the Democrats in the other bus?
Probably.
Ed O'Keefe, Kevin Cirilli, thank you so much for helping me break it all down. The start of the week.
With you, Nancy.
Appreciate it.